Just follow my lead. One night. That's all I'm asking. That's what I told her. One night. I said it like it was easy, like it was nothing. Like I hadn't spent the past 3 months noticing the exact way she laughed when something genuinely surprised her. That short, unguarded sound she tried to swallow before it got too big. I said it like I wasn't already halfway gone. Here's what I didn't say. That I'd chosen her specifically. That when my cousin Renata called to tell me her engagement party was happening in Savannah, and that the whole family would be there, including my Aunt Patricia, who had been asking about my love life with the precision of a prosecuting attorney since I was 19. I didn't scroll through my contacts looking for someone available. I thought of Sophia first. Only Sophia. I told myself it was practical. She was my closest friend. She knew how to hold a room. She wouldn't panic under pressure. She was good at performing warmth because her warmth was actually real. I told myself a lot of things that weekend. None of them were the truth. The truth was sitting in my chest like something I'd swallowed too fast, lodged somewhere between my ribs, not painful enough to be a crisis, too present to be ignored. I asked her to pretend to love me for one night. She agreed. And then she refused to let either one of us pretend it was pretend. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Sophia Reyes came into my life the way most important things do, sideways, without announcement, during a moment when I was paying attention to something else entirely. We were both waiting for the same connecting flight at O'Hare. She was sitting cross-legged on an airport chair with a paperback open on her knee, and a coffee cup balanced on the armrest in a way that was clearly going to end in disaster. I watched her turn a page without looking up. I watched the coffee cup tilt. I didn't say anything. It fell. She looked at the mess on the floor, then up at me, because I was the only person close enough to have watched it happen, and said nothing. "You saw that coming," she said. Not accusatory, just factual. 2 minutes ago, I said. She stared at me for a second. Then she laughed. That short, surprised sound I would spend 3 months memorizing without meaning to, and said, "That's fair." We ended up on the same flight. Same row, by coincidence or by whatever runs the world's stranger machinery. She was flying to Portland for a friend's wedding. I was flying home after a work conference I'd spent most of silently composing grocery lists in my head. We talked for 4 hours. Not the polished kind of talking you do with strangers when you're both performing likability. The real kind. The kind where you say something you hadn't planned to say, and then don't take it back. By the time we landed, I knew she was 31, that she'd grown up in San Antonio, that she taught high school English, and had complicated feelings about it, that she'd moved to Portland 2 years ago for reasons she described as a combination of good intentions and bad timing, and that she reread books she loved the way other people rewatched favorite movies, not for the plot, but for the feeling of being inside something familiar. I gave her my number before we got off the plane, not as a gesture, as a fact. We've been friends for 3 years now. Friends is the right word. I've always insisted on that. Sophia is my closest friend, the person I call when something good happens, when something bad happens, when nothing particular is happening but I need to hear someone else's voice in my apartment on a Tuesday night. She's the person who shows up with takeout when I've had a hard week without me having to say the week was hard. The person who remembers things I mentioned once in passing and asks about them later like they matter. She's also... And this is the part I'd gotten very good at not finishing that sentence. She's also the kind of woman who walks into a room and reorganizes it by existing in it, not in a loud way, in a gravitational way. Quietly. Completely. The way some people just have more weight to them than others. She has dark hair she usually wears back when she's working and loose when she's not. And I know the difference between those two versions of her the way you know. The difference between a familiar street in daylight and in rain. Same street, completely different feeling. She has a way of listening that makes you feel like what you're saying is the only thing happening in the world. And she argues when she disagrees with you. Doesn't get cold and distant. Just argues, clearly, directly, with this slight forward lean like she's coming toward the conversation instead of managing it from a safe distance. I had never let myself want her. I was good at that. I'd had years of practice. My family is Catholic and Southern in the way that means both things simultaneously. Big on love, conditional on specifics. My mother knew about me and had adjusted her understanding of the world to accommodate it with a grace I still felt grateful for and slightly guilty about. My Aunt Patricia had not made similar adjustments. Patricia was my mother's older sister, sharp-tongued and deeply invested in the architecture of family appearances. She had asked me, at every gathering for 6 years, whether I was seeing anyone. When I said no, she said things like, "You just haven't found the right person," in a tone that always implied the person she had in mind fit a very particular description. I had spent years managing her by being vague. Then Renata's engagement party arrived like a deadline. Renata was Patricia's daughter and my favorite cousin, loud, warm, genuinely happy in the way some people manage to be without it costing anyone anything. She was marrying a woman named Claire, and the party was happening in Savannah, and the whole extended family would be there for a long weekend, and I would be there alone, and Patricia would have 72 uninterrupted hours to conduct her investigation. I called Sophia on a Wednesday evening, sitting on my kitchen floor for reasons I don't fully remember, and I asked her to come with me. "As what?" she said. I had prepared for this question. I had a whole reasonable explanation. "As my girlfriend," I said. "Fake, just for the weekend. My aunt it's complicated. I just need someone beside me." A pause. "You want me to be your fake girlfriend at a family event?" she said. "For a weekend in Savannah." Another pause, shorter. "Okay," she said. "Just okay." Like I'd asked her to help me move a bookshelf. I told myself the feeling that rushed through me when she said that was relief. It was not only relief. We drove down to Savannah because Sophia said she wanted to see the countryside, which I suspected was her way of giving us transition time, a buffer between real life and whatever we were about to perform. She made a playlist. Of course she made a playlist. It started with something slow and easy, and slid into Fleetwood Mac somewhere around the Georgia state line. And I watched the landscape flatten and green out the window, and tried very hard not to think about the fact that her hand was resting on the console between us, 3 inches from mine. "We should probably have a story," she said, somewhere outside Atlanta. A story. About us. How we got together, people will ask. She glanced at me briefly, then back at the road. She was driving because she'd called it before I could. "We should have something that sounds true." "What sounds true to you?" She thought about it for a moment. I watched her think. The slight compression of her lips, the tiny furrow between her brows that appeared when she was working something out. "That we were friends first," she said. "For a long time. And then something shifted. That's always the most believable kind." Something in my chest contracted. "Why is that the most believable kind?" I asked. My voice came out steady. I was proud of that. "Because it usually is the true kind," she said simply. "The feelings have somewhere to root. They've been growing in the dark before anyone names them." I looked back out the window. "Okay," I said. "We were friends first. And then one night something shifted," she continued, like she was constructing a story she'd told before. "And neither of us was sure. And then we were. That's vague. That's realistic." I didn't argue. We checked into the hotel, separate rooms, which I had booked with great deliberateness, and met Renata in the lobby an hour later. Renata grabbed Sophia immediately, pulled her into a hug like she'd known her for years, and said, "I've heard so much about you," in a tone that I registered with a small, quiet alarm. I had talked about Sophia, apparently more than I'd realized. "Same," Sophia said, and smiled at Renata with such warmth that my cousin visibly relaxed something she'd been holding. That was a thing Sophia could do. Not just make people comfortable, but make them feel genuinely met. It wasn't performance. It was just her. Claire arrived a few minutes later, tall and composed and immediately kind in a way that had nothing to prove. I watched how she and Renata stood together. That specific gravity couples develop, the slight tilt toward each other like plants toward light, and felt something complicated and quiet move through me. Sophia appeared at my side. She didn't say anything. She just came and stood close enough that her shoulder was touching mine, and I had this sudden disorienting awareness of my own body, the precise location of every point where we were in contact, the warmth of her arm through the fabric of my shirt. I had stood next to Sophia 100 times. This felt nothing like those times. This felt like standing next to something I'd been not looking at directly for 3 years, and had finally, accidentally, looked at. Dinner that first night was the whole family. Renata's parents, her siblings, various aunts and cousins and their partners, a long table at a restaurant near the river with low lighting, and the particular noise of people who are both related and slightly performing for each other. Patricia arrived late and sat directly across from us. I had known this was coming. I had rehearsed for this. I had told Sophia everything I knew about Patricia. Her lines of interrogation, her pressure points, the particular smile she used when she was filing information away. What I had not prepared for was the way Sophia handled it. Patricia asked the questions she always asked, but redirected: how we met, how long, what made it serious. And Sophia answered with this unhurried clarity that I had never managed when talking to Patricia about anything. She didn't embellish. She didn't perform. She talked about me the way she actually talked about me in real life, with this quiet specificity that sounded nothing like a rehearsed story. She said, "I've never known anyone who pays attention the way she does. Not just to conversations, to the shape of things. She notices what other people miss." Patricia studied her. Then she looked at me. "She's right about that," my mother said, from 3 seats down, not looking up from her menu. I looked at Sophia. She was already looking at me. She had the smallest smile, not triumphant, not performed, just present. Like she'd said the thing because it was true, and it being useful was a secondary concern. I looked away first. I spent the rest of dinner being careful about that. About looking away first. The second day was worse. Not because anything went wrong, because everything went right. Because Sophia was. She was exactly what she always was, and that was the problem. I had spent 3 years managing the distance between who she was and what I let myself feel about it. 72 hours in Savannah, with the explicit premise that she was mine, was dismantling that management system piece by piece. She took my hand when we walked through the squares. That was the arrangement. Small gestures, nothing theatrical, just enough to make the thing look real. And I understood the logic. But I had not understood what it would feel like to have her fingers linked with mine while Spanish moss drifted through the afternoon light, and she pointed out the architecture of things like it genuinely delighted her, because it genuinely did. Sophia found things delightful, not in a performed way, in a specific, attentive way. She'd stop in front of a doorway and say, "Look at that ironwork," and mean it. She'd notice the way light hit a river at a particular angle, and go quiet for a second like she wanted to keep it. I had always loved that about her in the way I was allowed to love things about her, as a friend noticing something good. Walking through Savannah with my hand in hers, it felt different. It felt like evidence. That evening there was a bonfire at the rental house Renata and Claire had taken for the weekend. Casual, family sprawled on chairs and blankets in the backyard, the smell of wood smoke and someone's playlist drifting through the dark. I was talking to my cousin Daniela when Sophia came and sat behind me on the porch step, close enough that her knees were on either side of my hips, and she leaned forward slightly, and I felt the warmth of her before she said a word. "Your aunt is watching," she said quietly, close to my ear. I didn't look at Patricia. I couldn't. "I know," I said. "Do you want me to do something?" she asked. "No," I said. "This is fine. This is enough." She stayed there. I stayed there. Daniela was talking about her drive down. I was hearing about 40% of it. I was aware of every breath Sophia took. This is when I stopped being able to lie to myself. Not completely. I would keep trying for another 18 hours, the way you keep trying to close a door that's already moved past its frame. But sitting in the firelight with her behind me, and her hands resting loosely at her own knees, and the warmth of her radiating against my back, I felt the thing I had spent 3 years carefully not feeling, and I felt it with a completeness that had no more room for negotiation. I was in love with her. Not recently. Not because of Savannah. Savannah hadn't created anything. It had only lit up what had been there in the dark. What she had described in the car, without knowing she was describing us. Feelings that had somewhere to root, growing before anyone named them. The problem? The structural problem that had nothing to do with what I felt and everything to do with the world we existed in, was this. Sophia was my best friend, and best friends were a specific kind of safe. The kind where you could love someone this completely and have it be acceptable, be welcome, be something neither of you had to manage or navigate or risk. The moment I moved it out of that category, I risked losing the only version of her I was certain I got to keep. I also couldn't tell if any of this was real for her. That was the other thing. She was warm, but she was warm with everyone. She held my hand, but she'd agreed to hold my hand. She'd said those things about me at dinner, but she'd said them because she was helping me. Every piece of evidence I turned over had 2 sides, and I was not in a position to trust my own interpretation of any of it. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay in the hotel room in the dark and made a very firm decision. I would get through the last day. I would thank Sophia for her generosity. I would go home, and I would quietly dismantle whatever had opened up in me this weekend. Put it back behind the door, relearn the management. I was good at that. I had 3 years of practice. The next morning, the last morning, Patricia found me alone on the hotel patio while I was having coffee. She sat down across from me without being invited. Patricia never waited for invitations, and looked at me for a moment with an expression I didn't immediately recognize. It wasn't the prosecutorial look. It was something less comfortable. "She looks at you," Patricia said. I kept my face still. "What?" "Sophia." Patricia wrapped her hands around her own coffee. "The way she looks at you when you're not watching. I've been trying to figure out what it reminds me of." She paused. "It reminds me of how your uncle looked at me when we first met. Before he said anything, when he still thought I didn't know. I didn't say anything." "I haven't always understood your life," Patricia said, in a tone that cost her something. "I want you to know that I'm trying to." I looked at the river. "Thank you," I said. It was the truest thing I'd said to her in years. She patted my hand once, brisk and awkward and genuine, and went back inside. I sat there with my coffee going cold, and my chest doing something I didn't have a word for. "She looks at you." I had not let myself look for that. I had been so focused on managing my own expression that I had not once let myself look for hers. But before we go further, if you've made it this far, it's because you know this feeling. That specific weight of something you've been carrying so carefully that you forgot it was a weight at all. Click the like button right now. It's the smallest thing, and it helps more than you know. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe and hit that bell. That's how YouTube tells you when a new story lands here. Now I need you to tell me something in the comments. Have you ever agreed to something you told yourself was simple, and felt, the moment it started, that you'd been lying to yourself? That you'd known all along? Write it for me. I read every single one. And tell me what city you're watching from. I'll put a heart on it. Now, back to Savannah. I found Sophia on the hotel balcony. She was leaning against the railing, coffee in hand, looking out at the water with that particular stillness she got when she was thinking through something real. Her hair was down. She was wearing a gray sweater I'd seen her in before. Soft, oversized, the kind that meant she wasn't performing anything for anyone that morning. She turned when she heard me. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I had planned a speech. Something measured and grateful and clean. "Thank you for this weekend. This meant a lot to me. Let's go home and go back to normal." I had constructed it carefully in my hotel room, and I was going to deliver it with the same steadiness I used for every difficult thing. "My aunt talked to me this morning," I said instead. Sophia waited. She said, I stopped, started again. She said, "You look at me." Something shifted in Sophia's expression. Not surprise. Something that looked more like a person setting something down they'd been carrying for a while. "Is she wrong?" I asked. Sophia held my gaze for a long moment. The river was behind her, moving slow and gold in the morning light. Someone was calling from inside the hotel. Somewhere below us, a door opened and closed. "No," she said. Quiet. Clear. "She's not wrong." The word went through me like a key turning. "Sophia." "I know what we said this was," she said. "I know I agreed to it. I need you to understand that I agreed to it knowing exactly what I was walking into, and I told myself I could manage it, and I was wrong." She set her coffee down on the railing. "I've been wrong about that for longer than this weekend." I stared at her. "How long?" I heard myself ask. She almost smiled. Almost. "Do you want a number or a story?" "I want the truth." She looked at me, full, direct, the way she looked at things she was serious about. "The truth is that I've been in love with you since approximately the second year of our friendship. And I've been very careful with it because I didn't want to be the thing that broke what we have. And I came to Savannah because when you asked me to be beside you, there was no version of me that could say no. Not because it was convenient, because..." She stopped. "Because you asked." The railing was cold under my hand. I'd grabbed it without noticing. "You should have told me," I said, and heard the shake in my own voice. "You should have told me," she said back, and there was no accusation in it. Just the sound of two people who had both been standing on the same side of a door neither had opened. I was the one who had always been on the wrong side of things. The wrong side of my family's expectations. The wrong side of what was safe to want. The wrong side of a friendship I had treated like a ceiling instead of a floor. "The whole weekend," I said. "When you held my hand. That was real," she said. "When you said those things at dinner. That was real. When you sat behind me at the fire. All of it," she said. "Cass, all of it." My name in her mouth, the way she said it, like she'd been holding it differently than she let on. I had spent 3 years being the one who had it together, the one with the management system, the one who understood the structural impossibility of this, and had made her peace with it, and was fine, was good, was handling it. Sophia Reyes was standing on a hotel balcony in Savannah, looking at me like the weekend was over, and she was done pretending that the pretending had been pretend. And I was completely unequipped for who I turned out to be in that moment. I wasn't the composed one. I was never the composed one. She was. She had always been the one with the stillness, the patience, the capacity to hold something difficult without letting it spill. I'd mistaken that for distance, for not feeling what I felt. I had constructed an entire story about the two of us, in which I was the one quietly suffering, and she was the one serenely unaffected. And I had been wrong about it the entire time. She had been right, on the drive down. The most believable kind of love story is the one where you were friends first. Because the feelings have somewhere to root. They grow in the dark before anyone names them. I started. I know, she said. I was afraid. I know that too. I didn't want to lose. Cass. She stepped toward me, close, not touching, giving me the same room she always gave, the space to decide. You were never going to lose me. That was never on the table. I looked at her. At this woman I had known for 3 years, had memorized without meaning to, had loved in every safe form of the word, had built an entire careful architecture around the specific shape of not letting myself want her the way I wanted her. I'm sorry I asked you to pretend, I said. I'm not, she said. I needed you to ask. Something broke open in me, not painfully. The way something breaks open when it's been held shut too long, and the holding is finally what hurts. We can't go back to what it was, I said. I know. I don't want to. Her expression, that stillness finally giving way to something warmer, something that had been there all along under the surface, went entirely, quietly soft. Good, she said. Here is the thing about Sophia that I had never let myself fully understand until that morning. She was the steady one, not because she didn't feel things, because she felt them and stayed anyway, moved toward them instead of managing them from a distance. I had spent 3 years thinking I was the one in control of our friendship, the one who understood its parameters, maintained its shape, made sure it stayed in the category I'd assigned it. I thought I was protecting her from a complication she didn't know existed. What I hadn't seen, what I only started seeing on that balcony and kept seeing in the days and weeks after, was that I had been the protected one. She had loved me carefully, quietly. At a distance she maintained not because she didn't want to cross it, but because she understood that I wasn't ready. And she valued what we had enough to wait, in a way I hadn't even known to be grateful for. That morning in Savannah, we stood on the balcony until the checkout time came and went, and neither of us mentioned it. She didn't kiss me. We didn't make any grand gesture. She just moved to stand beside me at the railing, and we stood there looking at the river together. And after a while she said, "What do you want to do?" And I understood she wasn't asking about the rest of the day. "I want to stop being careful," I said. "Okay," she said. That was how it started. With an okay, the same word she'd used when I'd asked her to pretend. Except now we both knew it was the same answer to a completely different question. I had come to Savannah thinking Sophia was the steady one, and I was the complicated one. The one with the family history, and the structural barriers, and the years of management, and the feelings I'd worked so hard to contain. I had come thinking I needed her to play a role for me, to stand between me and the pressure, to be the performance I couldn't pull off alone. What I was driving home with, her playlist on again, her hand on the console this time without any premise, 3 inches from mine, and then, somewhere past the Georgia line, not 3 inches from mine at all, was the knowledge that I had had it completely inverted. She was not the support structure I'd borrowed. She was the thing I'd been building toward. The grief in that was real. 3 years I could not get back. 3 years of the careful management, the practiced distance, the story I'd told myself about what was possible and what was safe, and what I was protecting by not wanting her in the open. But grief for lost time is a particular kind of grief, the kind that contains its own answer. You grieve it because of what you now have, because the not having is finally over. I had spent so long being afraid of what I might lose that I had not noticed I was already holding it. She knew me. She had always known me. The attention I paid, the things I noticed, the shape of the way I moved through the world. She'd named those things at dinner without being asked and meant every word. And I had known her. The delight she found in architecture and afternoon light, The way she argued forward instead of retreating. The exact sound of her laugh when something genuinely surprised her. We weren't strangers who'd made a wager on one weekend. We were two people who had spent 3 years learning each other so completely that the love had no more room to be anything but itself. "Hey," she said, somewhere in the middle of South Carolina. "Hey." "I'm keeping the playlist," she said. I looked at her. The window light was doing something to her face, the long afternoon gold of it, and she was watching the road with a small smile, and her hand was warm against mine, and I thought, this is what I was protecting by not wanting her. This exact thing. This was what I had been so careful to keep safe, that I'd kept myself out of it entirely. Never again. I came to Savannah thinking I was the one holding things together. I drove home understanding that she had been holding me, steadily, patiently, without ever asking me to notice. For 3 years. The strongest people in the room are not always the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who loved you first, and waited, without resentment, without demand, for you to find your way to the word for it. If this story touched something in you, write Intira in the comments, so I know you stayed until the end. And if you want more stories like this one, the kind that feel less like fiction and more like memory, click the video on your screen right now. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description.